Let it go, Jim. He's dead.
Welcome to Improv Autopsy and part 1 of my interview with Charles Frierman. Charles taught my level 1 class when I was working my way through the ranks at SAC Comedy Lab, and as long as I've known him, Charles has been 2 things: a librarian by vocation and an impeccable improviser. I played in many shows with Charles, both short form and long form, and if I had to choose someone to fail with on stage, it would be him. There are no emergency exits for Charles, and he's more likely to join a scene that's crashing and burning than to find a reason to leave. With Charles by your side, it's easy to delight in the havoc of a scene gone awry, and I've laughed with him many times in the green room after a show over things that didn't quite work out on stage. Well, not that many times. We're professionals and we don't fail that often. I've laughed with him once or twice. Once. There was one time we laughed about an onstage failure. Pretty sure it was just the once. Welcome, Charles Frierman, to Improv Autopsy. I'm so glad to talk to you. I haven't talked to you in forever, for one thing. It's great to have you. So, I guess, jumping in, do you remember what your first improv, or your first encounter with improv was?
I do. It's funny because I was studying in Germany, which was an exchange program in college. And I was like, I got to try something new. And I saw at the Uni Stuttgart, they had a guy who was going to be teaching Monty Python acting classes. So I'm like, oh, sweet. I love Monty Python. So I went, and then he quickly deemed the whole group not worthy of Monty Python and had us doing acting exercises. And we did like a little show at the end. And it wasn't until I got back to the States and saw Whose Line Is It? And I was like, whoa, that's what we were doing. I was doing improv. So I had no idea I was doing improv for an entire year.
That is too funny. Do you think it was just a ruse? The Monty Python thing was just a ruse? Did he have no Monty Python knowledge, or was he really that uptight about who he was going to give the information to?
I think he was that uptight. He had like this whole tome of Monty Python, and I believe we like tried a little bit of it on day 1. It was just atrocious. So then he's like, oh, let's backtrack this.
Do you remember his name?
I believe it was Guy Fawkes, which I later learned out was a holiday in England, so I'm not sure if that was his real name. He was actually an English guy.
Oh, okay.
In Germany. So I'm not sure if it was a fake name or maybe I just remembered it wrong, but I remember it being Guy Fawkes.
Oh, that is too funny. The Pythons recorded some of their stuff in German for the German audience and for German TV, so I feel like this whole thing they would approve of, the whole situation.
Probably. Want you to have been like, it was Graham Chapman in disguise or something.
I can't imagine him being that uptight, but it would be amazing if that were the case. So you did that. You came back to the States and you found out it was improv. And then did you seek out improv, or did you just happen upon it then again when you were back over here?
I happened upon it at my college. It was a group called No Holds Barred, which I took on as my screen name for email. But it was just like a starting out group. I guess one of the girls at the school had done improv at a summer stock thing. So she brought it to the school, and I was like, fell in love with it madly immediately, and everybody else was like, meh. So it kind of fizzled, and then the next year, like me and this other guy that was like obsessed with it, we kind of brought it back, and I think it lasted like 2 or 3 years with us, so it was pretty good. It had a really good following. The theater instructor at the college was like, improv is not real theater.
Yeah.
So he had banned us from all the theater spaces. So we were like going into random classrooms, and our crowd would follow us to random classrooms just by word of mouth. So it was pretty fun, like an underground improv thing.
Underground improv is sometimes the best. There's such a great feeling for underground improv, I feel. Now, were you connected with the theater department at all, or this guy was just like, no, you can't use any of our spaces?
When it started, it was run by a theater person, and I think he might have strong-armed them not to do it because it wasn't legit. So like after that, there was really no connection to the theater department. It was just like college students that just wanted to do something fun.
That's cool too. I feel like that. I don't know how often that happens. I mean, I'm not on a college campus anymore, but it feels like improv is a little more mainstream than it was when I was in college.
Yeah.
I was in the theater department, and the first acting class was actually improv. So my introduction was improv as theater, despite what your guy told you about it not being legitimate. So you did the college thing, and I love that because I knew that was your email address, but I never knew why. I thought for some reason you were just into wrestling.
Right. Yes. Sadly, it had nothing to do with wrestling.
And did you perform as your college troupe then?
Yeah, I was in it, and I usually ended up hosting most of them too.
Okay.
And that was kind of when I discovered SAC, because somebody told me, it's like, oh man, if you like this, you should check out SAC. And so it's like, that's when I went over there and I saw a show, and then I signed up for classes there immediately. So,
do you remember much about that first show
at No Holds Barred?
that you saw at SAC?
A little bit. I think they did Forward Reverse and Seen Three Ways, some of the classics, but they weren't classic to me at the time.
Right.
So it was like a brand new, eye-opening world.
Well, and I ask that in part because Kayla and I were talking earlier, and the first show that she saw at SAC, you and I were both in. She doesn't really remember me much, but she does remember you, and I'll see if you remember this show at all by giving you some indications. She said it was you, Mark Baratelli, and Ian Covell on one team, and it was me, Dinger, and Darren Humphreys on the other team. And Mark Baratelli was kind of late because he'd run all the way into the lobby to get like a Diet Coke before coming back in. And when he came back in to get on his stool, he kneed you or somehow connected with you and injuring you, and you said, "Oh no, he got me in the chicken bits, maybe?" And so that was how the show started. Do you have any memory of that?
Since you say that, it kind of rings familiar, but I don't remember any details other than what you just said.
Yeah.
The chicken bits might have knocked the memory right out of me.
Well, that was the beginning of the show, so yeah, it reset your brain so that you would never remember. You might remember this because I remember bits of this, but she thinks this was also the Giraffinol show. Do you remember Giraffinol?
I do not.
This was a bedtime story, and I guess Giraffinol was a dragon that was created by Dinger and Ian somehow, and Giraffinol was the name of the dragon. And that's all I'm going to remember about that. I do have vague memories of Giraffinol. She said rock, paper, scissors, infinity was the beginning of the show. I'm never going to remember that. I remember a couple of those that I did, but I'm not going to remember any specific ones. But yeah, so she remembers you being in the first show. Do you remember any of the people that were in the first show you saw at SAC?
It feels like Jay was in it. I think that was actually before I really knew people.
Yeah.
So I don't know if James was in it or not.
Oh, Newport?
Yeah, he might have been in it. It was actually in the space before the space where we started.
So the original Church Street space? Or
Yeah, it was. I think it was one of their last shows there.
Okay.
And interesting trivia, I was in one of the very first classes at the new space. Or, which not the current space.
Right.
Or the space before that, but the second space.
The Amelia Street space.
Correct.
Yeah. Who was your teacher, your first instructor?
The first instructor, Matt LaRue.
Okay.
Yeah.
And do you remember who you had for level 2?
Level 2 was a guy named Stuart Maxwell, and then Lyle Moon for 3, and then James Newport for 4.
Okay. Yeah, Richard said he ended up having Lyle 3 times, I think. For 1, 2, and 4.
But Lyle's pretty good because he's very good on support, so I think that's kind of important to learn.
Yeah.
I know everybody warned me about James. They're like, oh, he's the worst. Oh, I feel sorry for you. And I actually got along with him fine in class. I was like, this is good class.
I never had James. He was kind of on his way out when I was first getting connected. So he was there. I did see him perform a few times, but he wasn't there very long, and he wasn't there. He'd moved on or moved physically by the time I made it into ensemble.
Yeah, I was kind of there for a good chunk of his. I don't know how long before I got there he was there, but he was there for a little while when I was there.
he was fun to watch perform for sure. Great.
Yeah, I loved him.
Great
He was
stage
very
presence.
funny. Facial expressions are excellent.
Yes.
Which reminds me of you, actually. You have great facial expressions. Like, you can give 1,000 offers with just a look. I've always been in awe of.
Oh, thanks. So you mentioned one, No Holds Barred. Are there any other groups that you were a part of before SAC? Any that were had names?
And not before SAC. There was a bunch I was in once, like, I got through the classes. Then I started kind of... There's like a one called Second Base.
Oh, Richard was in that too, he said.
Yeah, Richard was in that. And then I was in one called Unit 44. And then I was in one with Francisco Francisco and I formed called Slothco.
Okay, I think I remember that name. Was there any reason for Unit 44? Do you know the reason behind that name?
I don't... It feels like it was something dirty, but I can't remember what. They kind of did a lot of shows in bars, so...
Okay.
It feels like that had something to do with it, which isn't my forte.
Yeah.
It was long form in bars, so if you can picture that.
Wow. Yeah, Richard mentioned doing long form too, and it's just a kind of a surprise to me because I felt like when it came time for early show, there was a little bit of reticence on the part of the theater for doing that. But I guess you guys were independent of the theater doing that anyway, right?
Yeah, it was just a few of us. It was mostly SAC people in Unit 44. Like, it was Brendan, Darren Vierday, I think Jay Hopkins, a guy named Matt Sewell, and myself, I think. I'm probably forgetting somebody who will hate me, but...
You're overestimating the reach of this podcast. So, is there any... why did Unit 44 stop being Unit 44?
I think they just all kind of went their own ways at some point. Like, they were all mega talented people. So I think some of them went to California. I think Brendan went to Chicago. So they just kind of dispersed.
Yeah. You miss it. As soon as a few key players are gone, it's hard to keep the group together. Yeah,
they were really strong. So you got to be doing long form a bar.
Yeah, yes. Bar prov is tough. I'm also surprised that Orlando had that scene going. Because, I mean, there's so much of that in Chicago and other places as well. And I just was never something we ever looked into in Orlando to try to do bar prov. I don't know if we were too snobby about it and weren't looking, or if I feel like it just wasn't on my radar to approach any place like that and see if they had a place in the back where we could do some improv.
Yeah. Oh, I think Ian was in that group too.
Oh, okay. Did your college group, did No Holds Barred, did that stick around much after you were out of there?
I feel like it maybe kind of came back maybe for a year or two, or resurged in a different format maybe. I'm not sure if it's still there or not anymore. I heard once I left, like, it kind of collapsed for a while, and I'm not sure if it came back, but...
It was probably the work of the theater guy.
Yeah, I don't think he lasted much longer after I left either, I think.
It's always kind of gratifying. What is the most shocking thing you've ever seen or done on stage other than getting your chicken bits hit?
Well, I have a couple of stories that were shocking and scarring. The first one was we got hired or the guy that ran this group I was in was like, hey guys, I got us this great gig. It's on a ship. You know, we're going to be like the entertainment on the ship. It just goes out and it comes back. And I'm like, oh, okay, this is good. So we showed up, and it was like this small little boat, and it was going out. And then he's like, okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to perform for like 30 minutes. Then they're going to disperse the guy's ashes over the side of the boat. And we're like, what did you do, you jerk? Oh, no. And we were like locked in at that point. So we went in. It was like the worst first half of a show you could ever imagine. Like, people were just openly scowling at us as we're trying to be funny at some poor guy's wake. And then they did the ashes, and we luckily were able to not have to do the second half. So that was the first scarring improv show.
Oh, you're stuck there because there's no escape. You can't tuck tail and run after. You still have to be there for the time you would have been doing the second act, right? Because the boat's still out.
Yeah, you're stuck because they're in the middle of the water, so you got to wait till it comes back in.
Were you on the infamous bus improv?
I don't think I was on that one.
Did you hear about that?
I did not even hear about it.
So it was. This was a corporate gig for SAC. I was not on it either. I believe Greg was. I'll have to ask John about it. But it was. Hey, so the everyone was on. There's like 3 buses, and everyone was there, and they'd already boarded the bus, and then it gets to a certain spot, and I guess like 2 actors from SAC get on each bus, and then they do this little bit of improv as the bus is moving. For like, I don't know, 15 minutes, 20 minutes or whatever. And it's like, okay, thank you, good night. But then you're just stuck on the bus. And they just had to sit and ride the bus until it got to wherever it was going.
That sounds brutal.
Yeah. Okay, so that was your, what's your other story?
It was about, this is a really bad one. It was about a year or 2 after 9/11. And the guy that runs the group's like, okay, guys, we're going to be doing a terrorist endowment. And we're like, what are you talking about? He's like, don't worry, I'm going to keep it classy. You know, it's long enough. Nobody's going to care. This is a nice audience. So we're like, this is bad. Why don't we just do a crime? And no. I got this plan. This is going down. I'm like, oh, Lord. So come back. I don't even remember if I was in the scene. I blocked out a lot of the details. But I remember there was somebody, I guess he was going to be a terrorist that comes in, and you have to like find out what his demands are, kind of a thing.
Okay.
So we're sitting there, and, you know, it's like, all right, we're on the flight. And then he comes in like with this thing pulled down over his head. He's like, all right, everybody, you give me what I want, or I'm going to blow this thing right out of the sky.
Oh, geez.
And everybody, you could hear the collective, ah. And that was the first line of the endowment. So now we had like 4 minutes of like half-hearted guessing because everybody just wanted to be out of the scene. And he was still like uber committed to playing this terrorist, and it just got more and more uncomfortable.
Did you get any enjoyment out of these at the time?
At the time, no. Afterwards, yes.
And I ask because I had you for level 1 at SAC when I started
that's right.
taking classes there, but also in early show and other places. I don't know if you remember when we would warm up just doing like scene in reverse tornadoes.
Yes.
And
some of my favorites.
Yes, and other situations too that I mean you were so positive in level 1 in putting people at ease and everything. There's so much joy in everything, and in a lot of ways that this podcast or some of my hopes for this podcast is an outcropping of that, because it's finding joy in our failure and celebrating our failures. And I thought that was something that a quote unquote failure, because that's something I thought you really instilled in all of us and embody in your work as well, is that you really and the scene in reverse tornadoes, for anyone that was wondering what that might be, we would attempt a scene in reverse, and when it got to a point where we didn't think we could do, like, it was just everyone was super confused, then we just spin around like everyone would spin around and do like a little tornado for a little while, and wherever we came to rest we'd kind of try to start one again, a scene in reverse. And I don't remember any of those succeeding, but they were such a delight. And you're just one of the people that I think of when I think of, you know, embracing or celebrating failure and enjoying it and having fun with it. And the scene in reverse tornadoes definitely stick out in my mind, because I don't remember any specifically. I just remember them all being pretty terrible in terms of scenes in reverse.
Yeah, I don't think any of them made it very far, but they were delightful.
Yes. I don't think we ever did them in a performance. That should be said as well. But we did warm up that way, especially at Amelia Street with that huge stage.
And to me, I know a lot of people like live for shows, and I love shows, but to me, like, early show workshops was some of the greatest moments of my life, I think. Just experimenting and playing and having fun, so...
Yeah, I know there were some that I left, and I was like, it's a shame that no one was here to see any of that. Maybe more so those than the, parent birds feeding baby birds, which was something that recurred a little bit in early show from time to time.
Oh, yeah. I did love Early Show. That was really fun.
Yeah, I was so. I mean, I was disappointed. My biggest disappointment for Early Show was that the song you wrote never got used for
Oh,
advertising.
oh yeah.
That was
Or was
great.
that like go, go,
Yes,
go to there?
yes. I might have it somewhere. If I do, I might insert it. But yeah, it was that was delightful. Early Show was a lot of fun, for sure. And part of it was because it had that underground feel. I think because we were doing it so late at night, there's hardly anybody ever there,
Yeah.
and we could just goof off and have fun.
But some of them were pretty magical, though, I must say.
Yeah, I think so too.
And some not so magical. But
uh, what is the hardest fail you've ever experienced or witnessed?
I mean, it's got to be either the funeral ship or
Yeah,
the terrorist in town. I can't get much lower than that, I don't think.
yeah.
But other than that, I would say at SAC they had 3 levels, like Lab Rats, and I think it was Next Gen, and then the actual ensemble. And I had kind of worked my way up through Lab Rats and then Next Gen, and I've been in there for a while. And then SAC kind of brought in something called Ensemble B, so they like sidestepped all of that, and then there's like kind of like Disney actors and stuff with no improv experience, but they got put into shows. So I was like, oh man, these guys get that break, and I've been working so hard. And then finally, I get asked to do a show, and I was so psyched out of my mind that I went in there. I'm like, I'm gonna commit. I'm gonna go all out, and I was like committing like crazy, but I wasn't really listening that good. And it was like a horrific show, if I can say so. And I didn't get asked back to play again for like another year, I think. So,
Oh, that's a shame.
in fact, they had me scheduled, and then they demoted me. They're like, we're just gonna put you as host for this now. So, thanks though.
Is that how you got into hosting, or were you hosting already?
I think I was hosting already. I think I'd been hosting shows, but I really wanted to play with some of the people that I've been watching for like years. So that I got that chance, and boom, got the big chain on that.
Now, see, one of the examples I have on here, I don't know if you recognized it when I sent you some preview questions to orient yourself to what I was going to be asking, but one of mine for the most shocking was Charles reversing the scores. Do you remember that show?
I do remember doing that. I didn't remember doing that until you sent that note, and then I was like, oh yeah, I did do that.
I heard about that from someone else, not from you. I forget who it was, but the story. Well, tell me that story from your perspective, because I don't know if I've ever heard it from you.
I think I was just like, I just want to do something kind of fun, and it's gonna be a little bit different, and throw everybody off their game, and we'll see how it works. I think I called it maybe like golf improv, because scores were lower, were better. But I didn't tell the actors, and I told the audience. So
Right.
it's like the audience was in on the joke. so, so they came out, and to them, they're getting these horror scores for pretty solid scene work. And I'm like, oh man, tough crowd tonight, tough crowd. You guys got to keep it up. And I remember the actors were so pissed in the intermission. They're like, these people don't know improv if it bit them in the face. They were just like fuming at intermission. I'm like, oh, should I tell them? But I held my ground, and I let it as a surprise at the end. And I thought the payoff was pretty big, but
Yeah, well, I mean, it definitely stuck because it was someone who was in that show, so it definitely stuck with them. And their version of it ended with, and then at the end, Charles said, "Oh, by the way, the scores were reversed. Low was good, and you threw the clipboard in the air and ran to the green room."
because they were seriously mad at intermissions. I was like, they're gonna kill me at the end of this, but it's okay.
I feel like after hearing that, maybe Mike or I think I tried something as a host, or maybe Mike did, I forget. But I feel like at intermission I caved because I couldn't continue because of what I thought it was doing psychologically to the people.
But the thing is, they always taught me like scores don't matter, just do improv. So I was like, oh, this is going to be a fun thing because nobody cares about scores. Boy, did they care about scores! Oh my goodness.
So, if anyone doesn't know, SAC is it comes from the theater sports kind of background of and it's a competition, sort of like what you'd see at Comedy Sports or whatever. So, three audience members have scorecards, and they hold up a number from 1 to 5 after each scene, and each scene then gets a score. and at the end of the show, whichever team has the most points, quote unquote, wins. But yeah, we're always told as well, the scores don't matter, and that was, I guess, more true for some people than for others.
And to me, the scores never mattered, and I didn't think it did to anybody, but wrong.
Have you ever felt wronged on stage or hung out to dry?
I don't think I've pretty much always been around pretty good people. I don't think intentionally anybody ever got me. I do remember, I'm sure you know, I am not the most talented singer in the world. So I remember one time doing a song and it was not going well. It might have even been in A Slice of Life, I'm not sure, which is like this thing we did if people pay a certain amount of money and then we do a musical for them. And I remember really needing help. I'm even looking to the sides, like begging people to come on and give me some backup. And they stayed away like the plague. Nobody wanted a part of that song. I was like, oh, I'm dying. So somebody has that on their video. So
I remember that because I was one of those people that left you hanging.
Oh, were you?
Yes. I was off to the side. So I even remember a bit of the song because I think it was one of those times where, so it was me and maybe Dinger and Jose, maybe off on one side. So I don't think we were on your team, or it was just me, possibly just me and Jose, and we were on your team. But I feel like we were on the stool still, so for whatever reason we weren't out there. And you were singing, and I think we'd had a discussion, so flashbacks, I guess, to your first apprenticing or your first time at SAC where you were making really strong offers but you weren't listening. We were not listening.
Oh.
So we didn't really know what was going on, is my recollection. And then suddenly you're over near us and you're singing, "She was the cheese maven." And then you gestured toward us. And we just met you with like blank stares, not knowing at all what you wanted. And then you tried it again with the other side to exactly the same response. She was the cheese maven. Nothing from them. And then I think you may have tried toward the audience, and they also did not help you. So yeah, Kayla and I will still reference Cheese Maven as a the illustration of that moment when you're looking for help and you're just not getting any. I felt bad about that because I wanted to be supportive and helpful, but in that moment realized that I had no idea what was going on and had no idea what to do.
The funniest part to me is that you guys are like, oh, this is a song. Charles has got it under control. We can just talk.
Yeah, we'll just chat.
Knowing how bad I am at songs.
You always had you always had such great attack though. So you were never afraid of singing, were you?
No, I wasn't afraid. I just knew when I was in trouble.
Because when I was apprenticing, one of the song cue scenes, I know Clark was in it. I forget who else was in it. I was on that team, and they started the scene, and they called me on in an attempt to avoid singing.
It's a good strategy.
I don't know as it worked, but I tried. I would have tried harder had Cheese Maven happened, and I saw some of the possibilities.
I don't even know what a maven is, so I don't know why I was using those words.
It's just someone who's like a really good cheesemaker, right? Wouldn't it? Or someone who's really educated in cheese, right? Isn't that a maven?
Well, hopefully at least it made sense on that level. It'd be even funnier if I was singing that and it had no context with cheese.
Yeah. I mean, as much as I know from paying attention, it had zero to do with anything else. So I guess we could have jumped in with anything and be supportive. And I think afterward, what you said, and you kind of in a sad Charles voice, was, "I just wanted you to repeat what I had sung." Like that would have been enough. We could have just repeated, "She was the cheese maven," and everything would have been fine.
I do remember laughing almost as hard in the break room, though.
Yeah. Yes. When we were talking about it. Yeah. There are a couple other scenes and these would, I don't know if these would be considered failures, not in a we're stuck on this boat for this funeral sense, but wondering if you remember two other scenes that I remember very much with you, being in with you. One of them actually was a few scenes, because there was a run there where you and I could not do speak in one voice together.
Oh, right.
Because I don't know what happened. There was one night when we were supposed to be a one voice expert, and we could not stop corpsing. We just laughed through the entire thing, and it was.
Oh, that's right. I remember.
We just could not stop laughing, and so that was one, which I guess in terms of playing the game is a failure. I hope the audience enjoyed it.
Hopefully. I don't remember.
Yeah.
I do remember it being a good time for us.
Yeah, I felt fine.
It feels like the host used to hunt us out because they knew we were struggling to.
Yeah. Like, as soon as we made eye contact, I think I would start laughing for whatever reason. And there was this may have been early show. I don't remember. I want to say it was on a bus. Like, maybe it was like we had established that there was a bus. So many buses tonight. But I don't know whether that had been established or whether it was a barber shop. But I think you were a barber, and you were telling me about your barber shop either way. And the gist of it was you only accepted $2 bills.
That's right.
And if someone didn't have a $2 bill, they could give you $2. And you would give them a $2 bill that they could pay with. And the logic of that is undeniable on the one hand, and just I could not get past it on the other, because I was like, wait. But really, that means that you accept people paying with just $2. You're like, no. They give me the $2 and I give them a $2 bill.
Then they can pay.
Yes, then they can pay. Yeah. We did that scene. I don't think made it past that moment because I couldn't. I wanted everyone to be crystal clear as to where my brain was with the logic of that. But that was that was I think that was early. I think
that was an early show, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Because it feels like we phased into something else and it may come back later, possibly.
Yeah. I definitely was. I mean, we didn't. I was laughing, I think, a lot, but it was just the logic of it. But it wasn't the same. It wasn't like corpsing like we were with the other.
I thought it was pretty good. I remember us going on haggling about its legitimacy for quite a bit.
Yes, we did.
Which I actually love those moments in improv.
When you can get into the minutia like that, or
yeah, because it's just two characters trying to break down some kind of situation they're experiencing.
Yeah, it's the now let me get this straight kind of moment.
Yeah, one of the things I learned most from you, and by the way, I idolize you. I think you're a tremendous improviser. Is the fact that you're willing to take your time. Like a lot of times in improv, it's like, you got to get to those beats. You see what's happening, but you always take your time and feel the moment, and you treat it very real. And I that's one of the things I think I took most from you. I try to work that into what I do when I do it. So
I appreciate it, Charles. I found that it only works when you pay attention, because if someone throws cheese maven at you and you're not, some things need a little more urgency.
Well, you did take your time getting in there and support it. Yeah. Still, you took your time with it, so that's good.
Yeah, I'm if not consistent.
Talking on failures, there was one moment, like it was kind of early on. I think I was still next gen, but there's a guy, Brendan Jennings. It was like one of those college nights where the fraternity buys out the place.
Yeah.
And I was on a team with him. And the other team was like two college girls, I think, that were lab rats at the time or something. But, the frat was like, oh, yeah, they're going nuts for her. And
yeah.
Brendan, in my first scene, like, was terrible. And, they're all like, you suck, boo, like screaming for the other one. And I was like kind of down because, the crowd had turned on me so early. And Brendan's like, keep your chin up, bud. By the end of the night, they're going to be screaming our name. And sure enough, like, we attacked every scene, and at the end, they're like screaming for us, and they're like, yeah, we like won hands down. I'm like, how did you know? He's like, you always just got to stay in it. Each show's different. So that kind of taught me a lot about not getting down on anything and just enjoying the whole experience. So
that's awesome. I mean, Brendan is such a great improviser too, and he had that attack and commitment early.
Yeah. I think the first time I saw him, he was polished. I think he had been doing it before he got to us, though. So.
Okay. His was one of the first. He was in one of the first shows that I saw at SAC. I don't remember much of it. I remember he and Jay Hopkins were in it, and I think there was some sort of like radio antenna, like for a radio station, and one of them had to climb it, and that's all I remember from the show. I'm sure it's more than either of them remember.
Probably.
But there's no zero context there in terms of why, or I mean, it sounds terribly funny. Do you have any horror stories from hosting? Because you hosted a lot of shows.
I don't remember like too many highs and lows from hosting. I guess the worst, like when you're starting out hosting and they have the thing at SAC where you have to throw the pink shoe if something's bombing.
Yeah.
And I always, well, you know me, I enjoy bad.
Yeah.
So I always think they're going to pull their way out of it and find an ending. So if anything, I let scenes go a little bit too long before I throw the shoe. Sometimes, I guess. I learned to be really quick on the draw at the Duel of Fools show because that's what they wanted. But, so I got yelled at a few times for that.
For not throwing
but
it?
no, you guys had a chance. And they're like, we don't care. You got to keep that show moving.
Yeah, that's interesting because I think the philosophy now there, and this started maybe around the time that I moved to up north, but the philosophy there now is that we should be good enough to be able to get out of those situations. And whereas I wouldn't disagree with that, I think the shoe was always a fun tool in order to do that and keep the energy up.
Yeah.
And so I have no ill feelings about the shoe or the box, because the box I felt allowed us to toe a line, the scum box, because we always did PG-13 or better, or maybe PG or better at one point, but PG-13 or better. And Scumbox was there to allow us to do more than that if we wanted, because there was an immediate punishment that was imposed, and then the theater didn't get emails later.
Yeah, I thought they were good policies for the most part.
Yeah, I think they definitely served a purpose that I don't think everyone always completely understood. But like scorekeeping, I mean, one of the things about scorekeeping is you got to be honest, and it's always got to be high score is the good score. Otherwise, things just fall apart. And
you also, the more you learn your players, too, that's in the show, like, you know who can get themselves out of trouble easier than others. So you know when to throw it quicker than others, depending on who's playing and how it's going.
Yeah. I can imagine Clark wanting you to throw it sooner, especially if he's in a scene with an apprentice. Like,
yeah, as soon as the countdown hits 1, throw it.
throw the shoe. Yes. I was also kidding about the scores always needing to be high. I don't know if you skated over that, but that's not an actual rule. Although I think you're the only one to have done that.
The reverse thing?
Yeah. And it lives in infamy. What's the worst audience interaction that you've seen?
I don't know.
Was there ever a proposal that didn't get accepted? I remember talk of a proposal once where, like, because people would do that, they'd be like, I'm going to propose. So after intermission, we'd give them a moment to propose in front of strangers. I would never recommend this to anyone. If you're thinking about proposing, maybe don't do this. But the guy got down and was like, he had this whole story that was kind of awkward about maybe her husband dying and then reconnecting. And then he knelt down and he was like, will you marry me or something like that? And she just kind of stood there, and then he was like, please? And eventually she said yes, but everyone was pretty much like, yeah, that was just a yes to end that, and there's going to be a conversation later.
Yeah. I do remember one show, I think they did like a dialect roller coaster or something. I don't even think I was in the show. I just think I was watching. But at the end of the dialect roller coaster, I can't remember who it was, but somebody saw like an Asian lady sitting in the audience, and they're like, I hope you didn't take offense at that dialect we used. And like, she was fine until they said that. And then you could see she changed immediately, and she's like, well, I did. And then it like got really awkward for like the rest of the show. And I think she complained afterwards too. It's like, just let it be.
Yeah, well, because it's not defined until you say something like that. If you're just doing, well, I guess no, dialect roller coaster, they probably would have said one, right? Said the dialect.
Yeah, they probably would have said the dialect, but
it's probably not a game that's not played much anymore.
But if you isolate her and put her on the spot.
Yeah. I'll talk to Mike Carr about this too, but there was, I don't know if you remember, I don't know who's in the show, but this was a show I was just watching. There was a guy sitting, this is Amelia Street, sort of in front of the tech booth. Bigger guy, white beard, white hair. Obviously someone who intentionally is looking a little like Santa Claus. Right? You can't look at him and not think that. And you have to be aware of that. If you look like Santa Claus, you know you look like Santa Claus, right? That's not a surprise. And Mike starts this thing. I don't know where in the show it was, and he's like, "Ladies and gentlemen, we have a very special guest with us in the house tonight. He's come a very long way, and he's doing this whole thing, leading up to it and walking over there. But then Mike sees that this guy has just kind of shut down and has this look on his face like, this is the last thing I wanted to happen tonight.
Oh, boy.
But Mike hasn't said it yet, and he's like, "Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Dick Van Dyke," and points at the guy in front of him. And the audience, loved it. They laughed, and the Santa Claus guy laughed, and he was totally relaxed after that. And that was just a move on the fly that Mike made. One of the slickest things. And he may have been host, but I was like, oh, that was such a smart move, because you just knew that Santa did not want to be called out as Santa. Maybe he was the real Santa, and that's why.
That's true. Loafing on the job.
Yeah, did not want to be didn't want the kids.
That's a great cover by Mike, though.
Yeah, I thought so too. That was definitely a near miss. I was like, oh, that could have been tragic. Greg told this story at a show he was at, and maybe you know who this was, or maybe you heard him tell this story, where it was someone who had been away and came back, and so was like just doing a guest spot, or maybe they've moved back and were trying to get back into SAC or something like that. And I forget what game he said was called. The scene started, and whoever it was just like, "I don't know how to play this." And they're like, "Hey, yeah, sure you do. You just something." He's like, "No," and he like sat down and started crying.
What?
Yeah.
Oh, that's weird.
Yes, definitely. And in an improv show, it's so much of it is about riding the energy and the momentum. A thing like that, like those awkward moments like that, can really just, there's a chill in the air, and
it can derail everything.
Yeah. There was one early show that I kicked some people out. They were, there was like 6 people maybe, and it was such a light house to begin with. But there were some people that I think it must have been like the 2 people, of the couple, it was half the couple's idea to come to the show, or they thought we were stand-up, and they sat down and they were just, kind of talking during the whole thing, and it was just impossible. And I was like, you guys got to go. And then Ian was there, so then that's all I had to say. And then Ian took care of the rest.
Yes. Yeah, Ian was never one to back down from the crowd.
No.
He was awesome. There's one show I remember, it must have been, maybe it was Lab Rats, I'm not sure. I think I was in it too, but we had some college hecklers like in the back row.
Oh, yeah?
Like just really obnoxious. They were drunk, I think. And we had just done a crime endowment. They were shouting through the whole thing. And I think it was Michael Mangum who was hosting. And Michael's like, "Okay, for the next game, I need 6 volunteers. This is called 6 People Out. So you 6 in the back row, if you could just step outside, and we'll get this next scene going." So they're like, "Oh, yeah, about time." So they went out, and then we made sure they didn't come back in. He's like, "Good, now that they're gone, we can do our real game." So he threw them out like in the format of the show. It was awesome.
Oh, I love that. Very non-confrontational way, if you can get them out there. Okay, you guys need to go to a 7-Eleven and get... at that time, there wouldn't have been one nearby.
There was nothing near that SAC.
Just the arena. Was that, or was that Church Street?
Yeah, that was the arena.
Okay. Is there a place, do you still watch improv?
I saw Second City in Toronto not too long ago.
An improv set?
Yeah, well, they did like a show where it was sketch, and then at the end they come back, and then they do an improv set at the very end.
Yeah.
So that was pretty awesome. And my wife, Blue, and I, we took a Improv 1 class there, which was great.
Oh, in Toronto?
It was, yeah.
Oh,
It
nice.
was kind of cool, just like with people you've never met, a teacher you've never met, and just refreshing basics and stuff. That actually felt really, really good to me.
Awesome. I still also love to watch improv. I know that there's, like any artist, I imagine it's difficult once you get to a certain point to to watch some of the stuff. But like you mentioned before, you always you enjoy the bad scenes.
Yeah.
So that makes things easier, and I can enjoy them too. I enjoy when I can tell that people are doing their best.
Yeah, I enjoy bad scenes if it's done like, yeah, like you said, if they're doing their best. Like if it's somebody that's just trying to sabotage, then I don't like that. Or
Yeah.
if someone's clearly showboating and like steamrolling people, I don't really like that type of stuff. But if you're actually trying and struggling, and then yeah, I'll actually look for the good in it and enjoy the good of it.
Yeah. Yeah, they're definitely different levels of bad, or different varieties of bad.
And I still do teaching, so I get to watch my students perform, which is awesome.
Oh,
so
that's excellent. Where do you do that?
it's like a local school here. I teach like they're actually like age 10, I'd say 8 to 15, 16,
Okay.
sometimes up to 7. So it's like school age.
Yeah.
And we have a couple of classes, and they're really good. They're like kids that are into the arts, and they do theater and stuff. So they're very eager to learn, and a lot of times they do stuff way better than I can do it still. So so it's like, yeah, I'll take credit for that. That was good. That's really good, guys.
My college troupe, which had a stupid name, Shallow Insight. I love stupid name improv groups, which is why I ask people if they remember names of the groups they've been in. We booked a show for an elementary school, and we were doing the show, and for some reason, like when we were putting the set together, we were like, we'll do story, die, but our version of it was like, then you had to die in the manner of the audience choosing. And I didn't think about it until we were like actually getting ready to start the game, and I'm like, these are elementary school students. I don't know how good of an idea this is, but they were so amazing because they were doing... I would have thought of this, but the suggestions we were getting was a piano falls on your head, or a stampede of elephants. And, it was just such great, wonderful, so much better suggestions than we would have gotten from an adult audience. Kids are great.
Yeah. They don't have any kind of censors, so they just let it fly, which is awesome.
Do you get to perform much anymore?
Rarely. Yeah, I mean, occasionally I'll do something with my students to kind of work through something with them. But
yeah,
I think the last time I performed, they have this thing in Orlando called Play in a Day. And sometimes they do like a little improv set before their actual plays.
Okay.
Like for the regular group, they get a topic, and then they have a writer who writes it. Then he sends it in to the director directs it, and they put on their play like, just one day. And the improv people, they just show up and they get their suggestion, and then they just do a little set. So I did that. It was with Francisco was in it.
Okay, yeah. He's in Free Daps, right? He does the improv with them.
Yeah.
Which is a combination freestyle, rap, and improv, right?
Yeah, he's a brilliant rapper.
Yeah, I remember him excelling at that. Even when we were in Lab Rats together, must have been, or I don't know where, what level that was. Maybe we were apprenticing at the same time, but yeah, he was always really good at that.
He's a great mind as well. Like we kind of did the Slothco shows, and to me, just like kind of like with early show with you and Greg and Jose and that, like the brainstorming phase. I loved brainstorming with Francisco. Like he'd have such great ideas, and we would put together these like weird improv show forms, and then we get to practice it out and that type of thing. So it was always like a delight, just kind of like figuring out show stuff. To me, that's one of my favorite things, is just the figuring out things in improv. Just, hey, this seems like something fun to try. Let's see if it works.
Yeah. I think that's part of what made early show so fun, was we were experimental like that, especially in workshop.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, like I said, I love those workshops. But
now, you were also the person that was responsible for Doctor Who's Line Is It Anyway, right?
It was, I can't remember if Kayla was one of the originals too, but it was me, Tony, Rechtenwald, Danny.
Yeah.
I think we were the main ones that kind of put that initial push together.
Whose idea was it?
I think it was kind of like a group mindset. We're like, it'd be great to do a Doctor Who show, and then like we just kind of started bouncing ideas, and then it's like, hey, let's try this. So I'm not sure who can take credit for what parts of it, but like I'm sure the first run through was absolute abomination. And then slowly it's like, hey, maybe let's try having the audience member be a companion, or so slowly you start figuring different things out on it.
Yeah. And I played with you in that, and Kayla as well. Kayla, I know, got on board fairly early, I think, and we played at Fringe.
Yeah.
And did you play with him at Gainesville Improv Festival?
I think I did. Well, maybe, no. I don't remember going to Gainesville.
Well, okay, so there's two questions I have about this. And so Gainesville first. So the story that Kayla tells is Jim Doyle was there. I believe he was the doctor for that one. And it was an Animal Planet was the suggestion. And remind me, are you remembering or are you just laughing at the idea?
Just the idea.
Oh, okay. So remind me how it went. We would get the planet. What were the other gets? Do you remember?
Probably the bad guy.
Yes, the bad guy, because that's what he had to figure out, right?
Yeah.
The doctor had to figure out who was behind it.
Mm-hmm. And I can't remember if we got what they were doing. I think it was just the location and the bad guy, maybe.
Yeah, and maybe a problem. I think that was because this is.
Or it might have been a time period.
Okay.
That would make sense for Doctor Who.
For the show there, I know one of the gets had to be a problem because it was an animal planet. It was a zoo planet. That's what it was. It was a zoo planet, and the problem was that all of the animals had escaped. And this is a near miss in terms of a failure. I think some great lessons to be learned here. But so they do the entire show. No one says anything about animals for the entire show. So actually, I guess Jim Doyle must not have been the doctor. I think Adam Scharf maybe was the one who went out and who didn't know what was going on. So whichever role that was Adam Scharf. But Jim Doyle was there for the whole thing because at the very end they kind of wrapped everything up. The guess was made, right or wrong or whatever, and then Jim Doyle says, "And all the animals are back in their cages." And Adam Scharf just turned to him and said, "What?" And they blacked it out. And the audience absolutely loved it.
Oh, that's tremendous.
Yeah, so that was that one, and a near failure. And if I am able to talk to Jim ever, I'll ask him about it. But the one I'm curious, and I'll ask Danny about this because I want to talk to Danny at some point. Do you remember the one we did for? It was after you got Patron's Pick, so it was the extra show.
Mm.
And what I remember, correct me if I'm wrong, what I remember is in like one of the first scenes, Danny's character died, and then he just lay there the rest of the show.
Oh, I kind of remember that. I kind of blocked it out, I think.
And I'm dying to know. I'm gonna have to talk to him. I mean, I'm sure he's a much better improviser now, which isn't to say that the choice was a bad choice. I just don't know what he was thinking. So I'm very curious.
How did we cover that?
I think we just we maybe took a step forward and left it behind us. And I don't think he was just there. I think for a good portion of the show. I can't be remembering that entirely correctly. But that was a real fun format. And you guys did that at a con of some kind too, right?
Yeah, it was. I'm not sure. It was like a very light con, I think.
Yeah.
But it was one by UCF, and it had like a few people. It's like in a little pub, and it had a pretty decent turnout, like 25 people or whatever. So it was a good show. It turned out to be a fun show.
Yeah, I think it was Dina. Dina was something. I forget, but yeah, it was trying to get its legs. I think still.
Yeah, I think that maybe that was before the run at Fringe.
Okay.
I can't remember for sure.
Gotcha.
I can barely remember what I ate for Thanksgiving.
Spaghetti.
Oh, Jim Doyle was the other one. I think was in a lot of the planning meetings too for Doctor Who's line, and he was great. He's the master of the Dalek voice too. If you ever want a Dalek impersonator for your party, Jim Doyle's the man.
Good to know.
I think you mentioned earlier, like, do I remember any near fails?
Oh yeah,
or
do
something? I don't. It does strike me though. It feels like almost everything I've ever done is a near fail. I think that's why I love improv, because the danger of it. It feels like if I'm not in that danger of failing, then it strikes me as, I don't want to say boring, but it loses a little bit of the thrill. So like I love it getting out in that area where it's unknown and it could go either way at any point.
Yeah, I mean, I agree 100%. I feel like those are the moments when it's most exciting, and those are the moments when the reactions are the best because you honestly don't know what's going to happen, and it's just so exhilarating. And if you try to pre-plan too much, then it just loses a little of the luster because you get lost in the
Yeah.
pre-planning. Richard had said that one of the first shows he was in when he first started, the host didn't even go over the games with the cast. Were you ever a part of that, or?
I don't remember. I wouldn't mind it actually.
Yeah, he said that the one of the first ones they were like, "Hey, do a musical," and they were like, "Okay," and they did it, and they'd never done it before, which flabbergasted me a little bit because I remember just in Gen S, I told him this too, that we were upset that we couldn't practice singing, and but I love that the risk and the payoff are so high, both.
Yeah, I think I would like that format, to be honest. Like, not just if you don't know it, the host gives you a quick explanation and then you're on your own, see what you can do.
Yeah, I think most of the time, if the name is a good one, then you can figure it out just based on the title. Like, oh, okay, should have said. I can figure out something that would match that name.
And if you mess it up, you mess it up.
Yeah, the audience doesn't know either.
That's correct. So yeah, I actually like that. I always remember, like, I would have a show planned and I would tell the games, and I would always try to branch it out a little bit, and they're like, let's not do that, let's go to some of our standards.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh man. So they basically rewrite my show before the show.
That was another, like, the early show era as well. I feel like the duels we were getting into, we were created some games that I think, or created in terms of they were new to us. So if someone else created them somewhere else, it's highly possible it's improv.
Yeah.
But I feel like Replay was one of those that we kind of came up with, and that made its way into rotation. And
yeah.
there were some other things I think that we did to either, Mike in Address probably not played as much as Replay, but other things of that nature that were like, yeah, let's do that. Let's try this again. Let's figure out why that just worked and try to make a game of it that we can play more because we had fun with it.
Yeah, have fun. Just experiment. Try not to make it too hard on yourself, because then that can implode. Give yourself a chance, but
and not to get lost too much in the if something does fail, not to worry about it too much.
Yeah, even in a show, it's harder in a show too. It's easier to get down. Like I said, like in that one show, I kind of got down on myself, and Brendan's like, "Nuh-uh, turn it around, buddy."
Yeah.
So like even in a show, kind of keep that attitude. Like, I'll bounce back. Like in the shows, like I bounce back. I don't keep I stay in the moment in the shows, but then when I'm driving home, man, do I beat myself up. Like if it was I just overanalyze everything. It's like, what was I thinking there? Oh, what a fool I was. How can I? It's just like a brutal. But like in the shows, it's just staying in the moment and just adapting and making that show work. But afterwards, I always found myself to be a pretty brutal critic.
Richard mentioned that for him, it was anything that went wrong, he would always feel like it was his fault. Like he's like, oh, there must have been something that I should have done or could have done to prevent whatever it was from going wrong. Which is, I think both of those are. I mean, everyone armchair quarterbacks their game afterward to some extent, and I think it can be somewhat healthy to think about, okay, could there have been a better choice in this moment, and if so, what would it be? But I think that it becomes unhealthy when we dwell on it or when we let that affect our psyche too much, because I think part of the reason that live theater and improv in particular is fun to go and watch is because there is the risk of failure, because that exists. And so it's good to see it every now and again because it keeps it, on the forefront of the audience mind. It's like, yeah, this could go either way. And so far it's been great. And yeah, that one was maybe a little lackluster, but these guys are great, or gals, these folk.
Yeah, I was always like hit or miss on the posts, like whether I liked them or not. But sometimes like it was awesome because they would point out something I was doing that I had no idea I was doing, and like those moments were invaluable. But then other times in post, it just feels like they overhammer things and just it goes on, and then you actually were feeling good about the show, and then it's like, oh yeah, I feel terrible.
Yes. I've had some of those. And I was like, hey, it was a great show. And they're like, really? Because this. And I was like, oh, well, oops. When you say they'd point things out that you didn't know you were doing, do you mean in a good way or a bad way?
I can't remember offhand, but it could be any way. But as long as it came to my attention that I'm doing it and didn't realize I was doing it, then I'm
okay.
Overall, I'm happy. I mean, I guess as long as they didn't humiliate me when they said it.
Yeah. Post was dependent on who was there, I think, as to whether or not it was beneficial, because there are some people that just everyone feels certain ways, and some people are less helpful than others.
Yeah.
I was going to say, I remember one of the early shows. Did we do Lost Musical for early show? I think we did, right? Maybe it was early show. Maybe it was an actual show where we were doing Lost Musical just as a game. But we didn't have enough people for there to be two people down commentating.
Oh.
So I was down, and I started it. I put two stools down there, and I started it by saying something along the lines of, well, usually I do this with Grandma, but she won't be joining me again anymore. Or something along those lines, to dead silence in the audience. And then in that moment, I'm like, oh, geez, what do I do now? Because, I could have, but I was like, no, you know what? I made my bed. I'm going to lie in it. So I just doubled down on the fact that Grandma had died, and I'm doing this show, without her for the first time.
Because you had the empty stool, right?
Yeah, I had the empty stool.
That's awesome.
I'd won them over by the time the scene was done, but that initial moment where it was just like, it's being slapped in the face with a cold fish.
Yeah.
I was just like, oh, geez, that was not what I wanted or hoped for.
Those are the moments that are tremendous, too, because, like you said, those are the moments that can go either way.
Yeah.
But like you said, you doubled down, and, whether it turned around or not, you were doing it your way, which is what counts, I think.
Yeah. I, having not been exposed to you and playing with you, I don't know if I would have had the same reaction. I feel like I learned a lot in that moment, but going into that moment was, because I feel like I also learned to revel in some of those failures. So I would have enjoyed that either way. And at that point, it's like, well, I'm going to have fun with this. Audience be damned. If it doesn't work for them, that's fine. But I'm going here because that's what I wanted.
And I think it would have not worked if you would have tried to backtrack it and because she's in the shower.
Yeah.
It would have not been quite as strong of a scene.
Yeah.
Then probably somebody would have come running out. Sorry, I'm late, dear. It would have just imploded from there.
Meanwhile, the actors that are wanting to do the actual musical part on stage are just staring down. Ways to ruin a scene. Kayla and I played with that a little bit. Before I actually proposed to her for a gorilla, I proposed to her. I said, Kayla, this is what we're going to do. After the beginning of the show or whatever, I'm going to have you on stage, and my theme is going to be related to proposal or whatever. I'm going to propose to you, but I want you to say no. Oh. I told Jose because he was in the audience, but I didn't tell the rest of the cast. All I told them was stay with me. Kayla did great. And when I got down on one knee, there was applause, which I did not expect to happen. And so I got down on one knee and I was like, will you marry me? And I have this fake plastic ring. And, but I think it probably looked okay from the stage. And she kind of was like, I can't, or something like that. And then ran off stage. And the entire audience was like, And then for the rest of the show, I was putting that in there, and at intermission, Mike was like, "Oh, I hope that's not real," or something like that. As we went off to intermission, that may be where I told them in intermission that it wasn't real. That may have been what I was thinking of in terms of I was a little too worried about what it was doing psychologically when I did it, because I had told Jose. So the entire audience goes, and then you hear one person going, ah, ha, ha, ha. Just one super callous audience member laughing at me.
That guy is a jerk.
Yeah.
Oh, my goodness.
And then I tried at the end of the show. I won, of course, because everyone felt sorry for me. And then I tried at the end of the show and being like, and I reintroduced Kayla, because she just went back up into the booth with Charlie. She snuck back in and was up there to watch, and tried to explain the situation. But then as people were leaving, I still had some people say, I was praying for you. I was like, "Oh, I'm sorry. It was just part of the show." So yeah, I think you gave me that sort of, I was going to say lust for risk. I don't know if lust's the right word, but the enjoyment of it and the seek out the risk and play there because it's fun.
Yeah, yeah. Those are the moments. Like, I feel like those are kind of things that maybe come with experience a little bit.
Yeah.
Because especially in the beginning, I think it's early to be hurt when something doesn't go right. But then as you do it, you learn that this is a moment where something even more magical can happen if everybody just stays with it.
Yeah. I forget who it was. Maybe it was Jay, because I had Jay for level 3, and maybe we were talking to him once, asking him about what he remembered about different shows, and he said, he'd done so many that they don't stick with you. But you remember the things that go really well, and you remember the things that go really bad, because those are kind of just burned on your memory. But all the stuff that's just really, that's just decent or just good, you kind of lose track of.
Yeah, I think it's true. But like when you're talking, then it starts coming back a little bit.
Well, and because some of those moments were more meaningful for somebody else. Like, I think part of the reason I remember the Cheese Maven is because I felt so bad for not helping you. So that was ingrained on me. It was like, oh, pay attention and support your fellow improvisers, because we just had nothing for you there, and you wanted it, and we we screwed the pooch. And we'll end part 1 of Charles Frierman with Screwing the Pooch. You can interact with Charles via his weekly solo improvised puppet show, Roy Rogers the Puppet Pirate, on Twitch. That's twitch.tv/Roy Rogers the Puppet Pirate, all one word. For more information and or to support the podcast and get access to bonus content, which will soon include some over-the-phone improv I did with Charles, if it doesn't already, you can find us on Patreon at patreon.com/improvautopsy. If there is anyone you'd like me to interview, additional questions you have for me or any of my guests, or you'd like me and or one of my guests to autopsy a show of yours that's accessible online, you can contact me by sending a message to improvbrain@gmail.com or reaching out through one of the links in the show notes. Thanks for listening to Improv Autopsy.